Let's look at some of the ways that we have some defenses and some privileges that come from our reporting that will help protect us against libel. Now let's just hypothetically pick this one out, that a newspaper columnist writes about a school board hearing investigating neglect or wrongdoing on the part of school employees. And let's say that the column that this person writes says that people lied at the hearing. One of the people who's accused, believing the allegations false and damaging his reputation, sues the columnist. Now, the columnist is going to state this is an expression of opinion and protected by the First Amendment. But what do you think? The court has actually decided this in this case, which was Milkovich versus Lorain Journal from 1990. This comes right here from the great state of Ohio, where a wrestling coach was in there was a match between these two entities. It ended in a brawl. There were people who believed that the Maple Heights coach, this guy named Mike Milkovich, had caused this brawl by criticizing decisions made by the referees. So the parents and the wrestlers filed suit in the Court of Common Pleas in Franklin County. This reporter from the Mentor News Herald wrote about the decision in a column, and he implied that it was his opinion that Mike Milkovich lied under oath during the judicial proceedings. And so Milkovich sued him for defamation, and he said that by saying he committed perjury, that damaged his reputation. And the court decided for Milkovich, and the reason is, and we talked a little bit about opinion and how it's protected speech, but this is not opinion. This is actually a false idea. This was a provable fact, whether or not someone commits perjury. And so it could be proven whether or not Milkovich did or not, and since that could not be proven or was not proven, it was not opinion, and therefore the reporter was not protected. Now, there is such a thing that's called innocent construction, and that will help you, or innocence construct is another way to put it. What this says is that libel hinges on what the words mean. And if there's a statement that has two meanings, and one of which is libelous and one of which isn't, then most often it will go with what words were understood in the case. As long as there is one non-defamatory meaning, then the defendant has to win. So once we have this idea of there being two definitions in the same phrasing. If one of them is not libelous, then there's a level of protection. But remember that the interpretation has to be reasonable, so we can't, have some really far stretch out there. Now, there are defenses beyond truth, because of course truth is the ultimate defense against libel. Not all inaccurate information is libel. It's really kind of goes back to how you did your reporting. So there's this idea of fair reporting, and that information that's obtained from an official record is protected, even though that information may be false. Now, the key here is that the report has to have been fairly and accurately reflected in what's said in terms of the public record, and the source of the statement has to be clearly noted in the news report. So if you don't cite it, but you go back later and say, oh, I got this out of this document, that doesn't count. It has to be represented in the reporting. So then the reason for this is that we need to keep citizens informed about matters that are of public concern. This gives reporters the opportunity to report on government doings, political happenings, official business without having to prove the truth of what it is that the government is saying. Now, there's another one that's called absolute privilege, and what this means is that you have an exemption from liability for people who speak or the publishing of defamatory words because it was made within the performance of a duty. So something judicial or political, when you're covering a court hearing, when there are statements that are made that may be libelous, you are protected from that because of the importance of reporters and the press as the fourth estate to cover what goes on in government. So if someone says something libelous during a congressional hearing, you have protection because of this need to cover government. Now, there's also conditional or qualified privilege. This says that reports about judicial coverage, they're conditionally protected. Testimony, depositions, attorney arguments, anything that deals in this nature, you have privilege by, again, reporting this fairly and accurately. And that idea of fair and accurate reporting is really key to all of these things. If you do a bad job and don't report things accurately, you really don't have any protection. So it's important that you do the best reporting that you can, recognizing that there may be some falsehoods that you report as long as they're in the normal sequence of doing your job. Now, fair comment and criticism protects us from lawsuits brought by people who are in the public eye. These are not necessarily the same as a public figure. This is people who are out there with the intention of getting attention, so they move in and out of the public eye. Writers, artists, entertainers, people who are out there with the intention of being seen and having their performances evaluated. If you criticize those performances based on opinion and this idea of fair comment, then you have a level of protection. So these are the things that it applies to: legitimate public interest, actual opinion of the speaker themselves. You can't do it just to cause harm. So, if someone's out there doing something and you just totally scandalize them because you don't like them, that still doesn't work. And you have to express this as something that's your opinion and not something that's a fact. And remember, it cannot be something that is a provable fact. If it's provable fact, it's not opinion. Now, neutral reportage is the one that we fall under most of the time. This is really designed to protect us in terms of reporting on matters of public interest, which hopefully most things that we report on will be of public interest. So there may be accusations from one subject to another. You may get information while you're out reporting that proves to be factually inaccurate. If you report it fairly and accurately, for the most part, you are protected. Now, not every state recognizes this. These are the areas where states that recognize the privilege will generally apply it here. So it's a responsible, prominent organization or individual. They make a serious charge in a matter of public interest against another public figure or organization, and the charge, again, accurately and neutrally reported. Now, there is a criteria of single publication, so it's important to remember that the statute of limitation begins when a defamatory statement is first published. There's really only one publication is when it first goes out. Now, if it's republished, there's a new statute of limitations. Now, most states have applied to the web this idea of that the statute of limitations begins when the defamatory statement is first made available. So at the first point that it's put up on a website, even though that website may live in perpetuity. And, one of the other protections that we have is the idea of a libel-proof plaintiff. This is Anna Cole Smith and her attorney, and there was a question about that, the reputation becoming so tarnished that really it can no longer be harmed by further defamation. And we actually have a court case that supports this. It's called Cardillo versus Doubleday, where this convicted mobster wanted to sue Doubleday Books about a biography written that had disparaging comments about him. And the court said he was libel-proof because it's so unlikely by virtue of his life that anything that was said in this book could really damage his reputation any more than it was, and he was unlikely to really recover any damages. And a great protection that we have is the single mistake rule. And that's, if a professional has made one mistake, it's not really considered defamatory under the basis that things happen, mistakes happen. It's when you have a story that has a string of mistakes in it, or when you have a long tradition of mistakes, that you're going to really start to get into trouble.